So Rebecca, Maggie, Joy, I had done a quick early introduction, pre-early introduction of what we're talking about today. Oh, Joy just entered the waiting room. There we go. Cool. So we'll just get everyone added on stage. Hey, Maggie. Maggie from
Hello.
Hello. We have Rebecca
Hey.
from Syrian. Then we have Joy joining in a second. And so excited to have you all here for this panel to talk about what we've been up to with Values Index. And ultimately, we had some incredible questions come up earlier on in the day, especially about, how do I do all of this align with my values, not just crypto and Web3, but even my regular full portfolio. And with Web3 and blockchain in particular, these concerns of energy usage, or what about diversity in leadership of the protocols and the things that are being designed as critical infrastructure, all the way to even the founders in Web3 and the people who hold both the tokens and the future of what's going to be built. So I'm so excited to have everyone here today. It's such a privilege to be working with you all and building. And honestly, it takes a village. It's the people you surround yourself that allow really amazing things to come to reality. So we're going to dive into all these things today. I would love for us to do some just quick introductions. You all know me, or for anyone who's just recently joined, my name's Alana Podrix, founder of Eve Wealth. We've been hosting this WealthVerse today in an effort to kind of give you a sneak peek preview into what it feels like to be supported by an incredible network of guides on a journey to building wealth, especially in a Web3 world. Maggie, I would love for you to do a quick intro.
Sure, quick intro. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here, speaking with you all and seeing some friendly faces in the chat as well. And so my name is Maggie Love. My day job, I call it, is I'm a co-founder of a company called Web3 Cloud. It's a consensus Ethereum company, advanced micro devices, the graphics company joint venture. And we build the infrastructure that your blockchain networks run on. So when you send a transaction on Ethereum, when you mint an NFT, when you do that first DeFi activity, we are the internet infrastructure it's actually running on top of. And so I spend my day in the nitty gritty there. And then I founded SheFi in 2020. And SheFi is empowering women to take ownership of their financial freedom through crypto education, experimentation, investing, and community. And so really excited to be here and a part of something, this community and this event that is doing just that. So thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Maggie. And Rebecca, I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself. Actually, Zirian is a big part of this day and has kind of really supported us in the making of the WealthVerse. So excited to have you here as well.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I was listening to the last 5 minutes of the previous session, and I really, really wish that I could have just stayed from the beginning. Unfortunately, could only join now, but I like Maggie talked about her day job. So I'm going to talk about my morning, afternoon, evening, and weekend jobs, because as with all people in Web3, I do many, many things, all of which I thoroughly enjoy. So I'm head of growth at Zirian, and Zirian is what you might call a DeFi aggregator. And that basically means that we do everything. If you need a wallet, we've got your wallet. If you need to track your portfolio, you can track your portfolio. If you need to view or invest in NFTs, you can do that with us. So we have mobile apps, web apps, and the idea is that, look, crypto and DeFi can be utterly confusing given all the tools that there are. Wouldn't it be amazing to just have one place where you could do everything you want to do on any chain using any wallet? And that's what we give you. So really cool app. If you haven't tried it, you should check it out. The afternoon job is that I'm currently in Oakland leading on product of the local community currency here. And I hope that we get to dive into community currencies and all the cool things that are happening in crypto that don't involve ape NFTs and actually affect people in the so-called real world. And then the evening job is with Values Index. So working with this amazing group of women, thinking about how we bring values investing to DeFi. And I really hope that we get to dive into this. I know that everyone here is representing so many different interests, but I'm really honored to be part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And Joy, I would love to have you jump on as well. And I think I also saw Mel come on, who's your co-founder. So we should totally bring her up to the screen as well, if that makes sense.
We should. Joy here, tuning in from Bitcoin Miami. Just got to a quiet place. I have a background in my traditional finance background is in impact finance, working in emerging markets with low-income entrepreneurs. Now I'm dabbling in the digital asset space and have transferred skill sets to there and created with Mel, my co-founder, an investment education community that's helping onboard those that are underrepresented into the space. And largely our community is made up of women. So we're trying to change the face of investing and also contributing to the Values Index product.
And I'm just gonna ask Amanda quickly if she can spotlight Mel as well, so we can get a quick intro before we dive in. And Kat, if you don't mind going to the next slide, I'd love to, like, as we're kind of in between, just share the problem that we're really trying to talk about today, right? The topic of this conversation is the future of investing and values in Web3. And why are we even talking about that? And I think part of it is this really visceral felt experience of the problem that blockchain is all about transparency in transactions, but the social and environmental transparency and the impact of that is not. And so when we go kind of to the next page, we've kind of captured this in this conversation. It might be small to read, but it's this idea of like, hey, I'm thinking about investing and blah, 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 and contributing to the DAO, but I have no idea about their diversity, their carbon footprint, basically all the things important to me. Where can I find this info? Like Web3 is totally transparent, right? You know, how many of us, I hope, or like, you know, put an emoji in the chat if this feels like something you've experienced. I know each of us have, right? Just thinking about the combination of people, planet, and returns, and the kind of future that we want to be seeing and actually allocating our energy, both our time, our money, and our capital. So with that, I would love to kind of spend this time going between each of us to ask specific questions that are, you know, really related to our backgrounds and why we've come together. To start, I think, Kat, if you could go to the next page of just this like global awakening that's happening. And Joy, you have an incredible background actually working in social impact and with an understanding of ESG in the more traditional financial lens, and then what the impacts of a shift into what was measured in TradFi and how that directed the flow of capital, and you know why we think there could be something similar in this new world. So Joy, if you could kind of share a little bit of like, what does values in crypto actually mean, and what is ESG?
What is ESG? Okay, so I love that you started with showing what all of our communities that we represent have in common, which is caring about what we invest in and what impact that has on, you know, people and planet. And I think we all often get asked, can I invest in a way that aligns with my values? And in order to invest in a way that aligns with our values, we need information. And information and data that's very powerful and allows us to make decisions of what we do with that information and to vote with our dollars through our investments and shaping the future world. And so I think just to make sure we're all on the same page, because the financial industry, investment in general, has so much terminology that's thrown around, and there can be a lot of confusion with all the lingo that's in the space, and responsible investing is included in that. I just want to address some terms to make sure we're all on the same page. There may be terms you've heard like socially responsible investing, SRI is the acronym for that, ethical investing, sustainable investing, impact investing, ESG, and lots of these terms are used interchangeably. So it can be really confusing. But generally, what's important to note is that these refer to an approach to investing that considers not only financial returns, but also social and environmental impact. We often hear people, planet, profit, like care for that. And so then if you look behind that, sorry, there's a lot of background noise. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I hope it's not coming through. You have to look at the criteria that's used to determine what companies, projects make it into a portfolio that's considered to be responsible investing. And that's where ESG comes into the picture. And ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. and you take a look at an investment, and then you look at the ESG criteria and whether it meets that. So let's say you're participating in traditional finance in an ESG fund. The companies that make it into that portfolio, it may be because they are companies that don't have activities in areas that aren't considered to be sustainable, or exposure to activities that may cause harm. Let's say fossil fuels, tobacco, gambling, guns. So there's a filter that's applied, so you don't have exposure to those activities through your investments. And you can also maximize then your exposure to companies that are doing good, companies with good social, environmental, and governance practices. And I also want to make sure, because we say these so quickly, social and governance, when we talk about social, this may be looking at if a project has fair labor practices, if they consider diversity in their hiring, do they contribute to community development, are they prioritizing human rights? And then on the G, the governance, often you're looking at a company's leadership, their board of directors, are they diverse? Do they have women representation, people of color, and are the shareholders responsive to the company, to the shareholders? So those are 3 areas, ESG. And what we saw happen in traditional finance was companies like Sustainalytics come in. That's a global research and rating provider, and allows investors to be able to view data on the ratings of companies related to ESG. And when that kind of data started being made publicly available, we saw a response to it. And this was decades, of course, later in the investment world, but investors started moving their money from low sustainability ratings to high sustainability rating portfolios. And I think it was around 2019 that a massive catalysis of these funds with a snowball effect. There was a 400% increase, I think, in 1 year, mainly driven by women and millennials. So that was really powerful to see the response to data being made available on ESG in traditional finance, and also being able to challenge. There's a lot of misconceptions around, if you invest in a way that aligns with your values, you're going to sacrifice performance. And we now have enough data and enough years of ESG portfolios to see that just isn't true. Study after study has shown that investing with a sustainable strategy can historically match or outperform a more conventional investment approach. So that's just a bit of a framing, the context. And I think, with the digital asset space now, we're asking those same questions of how can we invest in a way that aligns with our values. And the space is moving and growing so quickly. I read a recent study that said that 71% of institutional investors are planning to invest in digital assets. But one of the main holdups for them, and then for our communities, I think, is, can this be done responsibly? And going back to the data piece, is we need data. And I think, Ilana, you might be touching on this later and what we're working on, but investing in digital assets in the future of finance, it shouldn't mean having to set aside your commitment to people, your commitment to the planet. And we can do it in a way that aligns with our values. And there's a lot of narratives out there right now and critique. And what I want to remind people of too is that we are in the early days. And what's important is that these conversations are happening, and we have an opportunity now to ask for the products that we want to be designed in a way that aligns with our values. And so by us having these conversations like we are today, we're putting that demand out there. And there are projects that are doing good for people on the planet, and that have, I think, measurable, we can measure the ways they are. We just need to come together and pull the data. And right now, I think as individuals, we can do that. It takes a lot of time to research, scrap data, and put together a ESG portfolio in the crypto world. And that's where Values Index comes in, and be able to make it easier to invest in digital assets in a way that you can feel good about. So I think I'll probably pause right there. I'm really excited what we're doing to help ESG be in the DNA of crypto from the early days. And there's so much we can dive into the Q&A section on this topic.
Thank you so much, Joy. It's such a great backbone and history for everyone to then dive into the next level, right? Like the why we're doing this and why it's so critical. And the core piece being data, like the right information, what we measure gets done, and what we measure also reflects a lot of our values and what we care about. So we're really working on that. We're going to dive in a little bit of like what that tactically looks like and some of the results we're already seeing. So we could jump to the next page. Before we dive into that, I want to actually kind of go back to like the core of reality, because I get this question a lot. Like, you know, crypto doesn't seem to impact my life at all. Or, you know, all I understand about crypto is like basically scams and these like random apes. Like, I don't understand this. There's no place for me here. And I don't understand how this relates to real life. And Rebecca, I would love to ask you to share a bit of like how it isn't all memes and mayhem. There's, you know, we shared this image here of a tweet that you shared, which was, you know, you have direct experience with zero internet crypto native communities in rural Kenya. You're now working on this idea of community currency. And then there's these examples you also shared of preserving indigenous knowledge on the blockchain and UBI at scale. I'd love if you could, you know, paint a picture for some of the people on the call of, what does this look like in real life, and how can we reframe the narrative?
Yeah, very, very happy to. I'll start with a story just to give you some context of how I started doing this kind of work. So I've been working in crypto since about 2017, so 5 years. And I did a bunch of things. I worked for one of the largest centralized exchanges in Southeast Asia, and I was based in Japan at the time. I was working with ICO projects. I mean, this is really like the beginning days when things are a little bit crazy. And I remember how in 2018, there was this bear market, right? Prices started crashing. All these ICOs felt like scams. It was basically like a hype cycle, a bubble sort of market behavior, and a lot of similarities to what we see now, especially around NFTs. And I remember just having the sense of, wait, there is a huge, huge like chasm between what we say we're wanting to do and like what we're actually doing. So marketing teams are still using terms like democratizing finance and, you know, revolutionizing access for the unbanked and just all these grand claims. And it was like, at the end of the day, look, you're a centralized exchange. The majority of your users already have a lot of access and privilege. Like, can we just quit fooling ourselves here? And that, I mean, I'm sure there are people in this audience who resonate with that. I know Erin even just shared that she walked away from an organization that wasn't as committed to its ESG values. But this is something that I have experienced so often. And around the same time, I discovered this fantastic organization in Kenya called Grassroots Economics. And they had just been quietly doing their thing in Kenya. They had basically piloted an entire UBI program. So for those of you who don't know, UBI is Universal Basic Income. And they were doing this in the most unlikely contexts. They were doing this in places where people lived on less than $1 a day, didn't have internet access, and were using what we call like Nokia brick phones. And the fact that they were able to do this on a blockchain and have these people trading cryptocurrency was pretty damn impressive. So I was like, wait, what is going on here? I thought this was high-tech stuff that was only accessible to a few people. And well, no, it turns out that you can actually apply this with very little money and very little infrastructure, and you don't need a fancy app. And if you go back to the principles of people having sovereign money and being involved in the design process of that money, you can actually implement that. And for me, that was just very, very eye-opening. And I'm glad that I found out about it early on, because I had this fantastic opportunity to then go to Kenya, and I did a bunch of field work. I've been working with them since 2019. I lived in villages where people were trading on the blockchain, trying to understand how has this actually had a tangible effect on your life, right? Because I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter what the application is. The question we should be asking is, how has this helped you? And so being able to interview a hairdresser telling me that she is now employing other women in her community because she's been able to use this community currency, and that's, you know, helped to expand the number of customers she can go to. Speaking to women who are telling me that for the first time in their lives, they were saving more than their husbands were. I mean, that kind of thing is powerful. And this is back in 2019, right? We're talking about 3 years ago. This isn't some new, cool, latest thing. It's like This has been happening for a while. And I think what I would highlight here, and this is basically what I was saying in this tweet, is that it's not that these examples don't exist. It's that for whatever reason, there is a massive information asymmetry. And I blame many factors, but I definitely blame the media, right? It's like, it's not very sexy to talk about grandmas trading crypto in rural Kenya. I mean, I think it's pretty cool, but apparently that's not that interesting to many people. The market is very much driven by the numbers, right? So unless it's making millions of dollars or has a market cap over a certain point, it's also not interesting. And then I also think it comes down to who is building, right, in the industry. We have to pay attention to where our attention is directed. And I often think that is heavily determined by the fact that most crypto orgs are, the big crypto orgs are still based in the US, have a culture that one might call akin to like Silicon Valley culture. And so we have almost these blinders on. We don't realize that our perspective of the industry is so shaped by what is around us, right? We're in a bubble in more ways than just one. And I mean, other examples that I gave here of like preserving indigenous knowledge on the blockchain, some of you here might be familiar with the Kernel Fellowship that's run by Gitcoin. I mean, there really are people who are like, look, we have all of this indigenous knowledge, whether it's history or stories or methodologies. How can we make sure that we are the ones telling our story? Because we all know if you don't tell your story, someone else will do it for you. So giving people autonomy and agency over the stories they tell, over the money that they get to design for themselves. This kind of thing is so important. And Alana mentioned that I'm now working on a community currency here in Oakland, California, which for those of you who don't know is a really, really special place where community activism and grassroots work has been happening for a really long time. And what's amazing with Web3 and crypto tools is, I know sometimes people think that they're too late in the game. The reality is that we are still very, very early. We are still shaping things. And I mean, that's exactly why we're having this conversation. It's how can we make sure that these narratives, these use cases receive the same resources and attention so that we can do things differently this time.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And it's such a great segue into the question that I have for Maggie. And Maggie, you've helped from very beginning, like you're part of Consensus, which was building an ecosystem of applications for the Ethereum blockchain, which is what we're probably most familiar with, and then guiding and onboarding a number of women and non-binary and underrepresented groups into crypto. And so I'd love if you could give a little bit of your own description of, what is a crypto index fund? Like, why did they come to be? And what kind of role could that play for somebody? Like, why are we actually focusing on that in particular versus, just telling people what protocols to buy, or, what do you, how do you see the idea of a crypto index fund for a new person coming in? Oh, yeah, I think you're on mute.
Okay, so I thought I don't know what month we are into doing this Zoom from home thing, but I still have trouble unmuting myself. Also, yeah, Rebecca, just always hearing your story and what you've been focusing on amongst all the hype that you can see in crypto is just always so inspiring. So I just have to reiterate that. Yeah, so let's talk about crypto index funds, or you might hear crypto index tokens. And basically every digital item in crypto is a token. So that is a word that is commonly used. So you can think of an index fund, if you know what ETFs are, right? And exchange traded fund is like one, you can think of it as like one fund that tracks an entire index sector of commodities. So it's like one financial item that you can purchase that tracks multiple financial items. So it kind of rolls up specific financial items into like one purchase for you, essentially. And so crypto index funds or crypto index tokens are the same thing, just for crypto tokens. So you might see in crypto, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of different tokens now. And so many of them are projects in specific verticals of crypto, such as DeFi, which is decentralized finance projects, right? So if you want exposure to multiple DeFi products, you can buy one index token for that. Maybe you like a lot of the NFT projects, but once again, you don't know which NFT specific project to buy. So you can purchase a token that represents multiple NFT projects. Same with like metaverse, gaming, whatever vertical that a project is working in, you can find an index fund token for that. So what that index token does is it's one token that represents a basket of tokens in that vertical, right? So like I mentioned, there's DeFi ones, there's gaming ones, there's metaverse ones, there's NFT ones. And so it's really hard in crypto to keep a pulse on the fire hose of projects that come out every day across these different verticals. And so what index tokens strive to do is make it simple for you. You believe in the future of DeFi and all the projects working on it. You can purchase one token to give you exposure to the top projects in that vertical. If you want to purchase, if you really believe in NFTs and NFT projects, the projects building different NFT platforms, you can buy one token for that. Like I said, metaverse, again, metaverse is, we're hearing a lot about it because of Facebook's metaverse, but if you want to buy tokens that are focused on building the crypto metaverse, you can buy one token for that. For DeFi, there's one called DPI by the Index Co-op, which is a index fund token platform and community that helps build these. And so, right, when you're purchasing multiple tokens, you run into a few challenges. Which ones to buy? More transactions, right? The more tokens you purchase, more transactions, and that leads to more fees. So it can be expensive to be taking all these little bets on different projects in an industry, and an index token really just wraps up all of those promising projects and allows you to purchase them in one token. So reduce headaches of choosing which ones to buy, reduce the transaction fees, and then know you're getting exposure to a whole vertical sector industry within the crypto space. And it's been shown in traditional finance that ETFs end up outperforming single bets anyway. So if you apply that logic to the crypto space, it's better to get exposure to the entire DeFi space, the entire metaverse space, the entire NFT space, than trying to flip an NFT, trying to time the right one, flip the NFT, because honestly, a lot of the NFTs that do well are probably not things we even find artistically beautiful. So it's hard to do that. And so that's a little bit about index token. Think one token representing a basket of tokens for a specific vertical in the crypto space. And why we are looking to apply this type of token to the values index is because, we want to give people, women, non-binary folks, everyone who's kind of looking at this space for the first time, a way they know they can get exposure to all these projects working on these specific values. And once again, there's the phrase in crypto, do your own research. What this group is offering to do is doing the research, finding the data, guaranteeing you that we are picking projects that have these ESG values and wrapping them into that one token for you, right? So you can go and you can actually learn about each token that we choose if you would like to, but we're facilitating that process for you. So investors have an easy way to say, I know what my values are, right? I want to get exposure to this Web3 space. I don't exactly know how to make all the right bets all at once. And so we're going to offer, this in a facilitated package to you through this token. And, it's really powerful to provide like this one tool to get people exposed to this entire space, and to highlight that a lot of people are, and a lot of projects and protocols hopefully are working on these values that we find imperative to highlight and help investors get access to.
Super helpful and like really tactically easy to understand. Like there's this idea of a basket that's represented by a token. Thank you for sharing that. And just like buying any other token, you can take cash and turn, which is called fiat, and turn it into cryptocurrency that then can buy these tokens with a digital wallet. So if you're interested in learning more about that more step-by-step process, there's some great resources at SheFi and Eve and the DeFi course. So if we jump into the next slide, I think one thing I wanted to just share with the group is this idea of changing the way we measure value and success is really critical. And so we've been talking a lot about this data being the core foundational thing. I see a lot of great comments in the chat coming through about kernel and Gitcoin, and this concept of public goods being at the core of some of the ecosystem building in different blockchains. Then an idea of a public good is really about like an open source, really inclusive way of mobilizing people to participate in kind of the future that we want to build. And so the first element of that is, I think really the resounding response we've had to the concept of values index. It's very early, but we've been starting to put forward a set of variables that we want to track that hopefully drive awareness for other protocols and partnerships with them as well to start improving the scores on things beyond market cap, price, total value locked, but actually into things that are around demands, sustainability, and team. So we're thinking, in the same way that GDP is a very, not ideal measure of a country's well-being, the metrics we use to measure protocol and community health in Web3 only paint half the picture right now. So things that we're looking to measure and pulling the data for is things like the percentage of leadership that's female, the Nakamoto coefficient, which is a gauge of the decentralized nature of a blockchain, the Gini coefficient, which is a measure of wealth inequality within a system, on-chain voting, so things like ESG delegates, and protocol carbon neutrality, so both footprint and intensity, and even things like compensation parity, and all of this so we can get better at improving impact and designing with people and planet in mind. And so in the right-hand side, you can see actually some of our initial scoring off of this data, and a great survey where we got hundreds of responses from people to better understand what this design could and should look like. So you can learn more. We'll actually share the link in the chat, and also you can follow us on Twitter at Values Index. But I would love to just jump into the team quickly, because I think when we're talking about building public goods, it's great to show all the faces who are actually behind this project with us currently. So Kat, if you could go to the next slide, you'll see there's ourselves at the top. Mel is also on the call, but also an incredible background of people with experience in crypto, financial inclusion, and education and ESG. So we have people from the likes of Consensus, Cello, Zerion from the crypto world, ESG like Contentment Foundation and Good Group, and even more corporate venture from companies like McKinsey, Bank of America, Fidelity, Blockchain Capital, and Komarevi. So it's already a really focused group of people trying to work on this problem. And actually part of this is actually a call to adventure for anyone who is on the call that this resonates with. We're actively looking for contributors, especially around design, social media, and engineering talent. And we have more information on a crowdfund that we're working on in the grants round that's coming up with Gitcoin. And then also just an ask for good vibes. Like if you represent a protocol, we would love to connect. And this only really works from the people we mobilize around us. So just kind of end off on the next and last slide, which is this opportunity that we have to weave care for people and planet into our DNA of Web3 from day one. And with that, I would really love to open it up actually to questions from the audience, and for us to have an open discussion on, challenges that you're facing, or data sources that you've been seeing, or other projects that really inspire you in the space. We would, love to open up the floor. And Amanda, I don't know if you can keep track of, any of the good stuff that's been coming through in the comments or the chat. I see it's like pretty active, so that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And I know there's a lot of different resources being dropped in, as well as communities and their founders we're very familiar with and consider friends. So yeah, all of these will definitely be dropped into both Discord as well as like the recap email and everything. So thank you for everyone who's been sharing. We love it. It's been a really collaborative process, and I love how we're all just lifting each other up.
Super cool. Well, if there aren't any questions, one, I would say please drop in questions as they go, but I would open it up to the floor and the discussion between us as well. Rebecca, I'd love for you to share too a little bit more about any projects that you're starting to see in the space that are really influencing the direction that we've been going in.
Yeah, I think the most obvious highlight would just be everything we've been seeing around regenerative finance. So you might have seen the abbreviation ReFi, which is kind of a spin on DeFi, which was decentralized finance. And the idea is, can we use these same tools towards regenerative economies, economies that are good for the planet, economies that are investing in ecological regrowth, whether it's through carbon credits or tree planting, or trying to make sure that we have index funds like this one, where you can actually invest in these things and put your money in a way that supports that. And I think this has been something that I think has just been almost like a snowball movement, especially over the last year or so. We have more and more people moving into the refi space. So there are protocols like Toucan Protocol that are really leading on this front, providing the infrastructure for financial markets around regenerative finance. There are also a bunch of different products that are tapping into carbon credits, which I think is really interesting, obviously also very controversial. But as soon as you have a problem that can be solved through market dynamics, it's kind of a bit of a no-brainer that you would see a use case in crypto and DeFi. And I think we're going to see a lot of interesting experiments come out over the next couple of months.
Super exciting. And Maggie, I would love to hear from yourself as well. Like, as you've been on this journey of onboarding, hundreds and thousands of people really over time, what are some of the things that you've noticed? Are there specific themes, and how do you feel like it aligns with the topic we're talking about here?
Yes. I think that, through onboarding, people are really looking for like a trusted way to be onboarded, right? So some women that have joined the program tried YouTube at first and TikTok and realized that some of those outcomes are not very positive, right? Like they got scammed, or, the YouTuber glosses over how many fees it takes. They're just like, put $200 in your MetaMask, flip it into this token, like do this, right? And so a lot of, there's so much noise out there. There's not, even if you start with a, curriculum and they're like, go read all these articles, there's not really like a way to then put that information to use in a way that feels safe, supported, like you asked somebody, right? Because my program does focus on women and non-binary folks, and most of our community is women. As you may know from other types of groups, women really listen to their networks, right? We're more likely to purchase things that are recommended from our friends. This is why, Tupperware Club started in like Macy K or whatever that makeup brand is, right? It's because women are inherently people that are networked. And so what I think I learn a lot in SheFi is women do want to learn through like a supported group. They do want a trusted source. They do not mind some facilitation and somebody there with you explaining like what you're doing, right? They don't necessarily want to go and like hunt out all the information. And that's, partially because there's so much out there and they had bad interactions. And it's partially because we are busy, we are dynamic, we have lives and families and Web2 jobs and physical jobs. And we have all of these things going on, and where you got this one life on this, you got this one, chance to totally crush it on this planet. And so you also don't want to necessarily spend all of your time on top of everything else you have going on, all of your other priorities, like looking up a coin that's named after a food, or hearing about this other layer one, or feeling like you need to flip this NFT, right? And then signing a bad transaction, right? There's just, I think like those different things really lead to like why we're building something like this, right? We are women who are values and socially aligned, who have had experience in a variety of parts of this values index space and crypto space. And then we are going to help you with that journey, give you something that you can trust, help you actually be guided into what it actually is, right? People think that it's just like, post about your project once and like use a bunch of jargon and then it's good, right? But we'll actually like break down what this all means for you. We'll keep doing events like this. And, through this values index token, we can really do that easy facilitation onboarding into Web3. People want exposure to crypto. They want to see optionality in their investment choices. And this is really going to give that plus a networked community, plus, a facilitated onboarding into a space that's really important to be aware of and at least allocate a little bit of funds to, I think personally.
Thanks for that, Maggie. I couldn't agree more. And Joy, I would love if maybe you could close us off of just kind of explaining our process so far of how early we are in this cycle of what data is available, some of the manual work that we did in this V1 experimentation, and, how we're pulling from traditional finance, ESG, and what it took for them to build the data and how that changed behavior and why we believe the same thing can happen here.
Sure. I will start by saying it's so far been a much more manual process than we anticipated. There's the first step of first identifying, okay, what metrics, KPIs can we use? And then how can we collect that information? And we were looking from climate perspective and pulling information that's available out there, things like the LEAF score, and then assessing companies based on proof of work, proof of stake, and on the social and the governance that requires looking especially into DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a big part of that being representation of women. And we were struggling a bit because, as you know, in the digital assets space, there can be less, while it's interesting because while the whole thing is having everything on the blockchain, like the teams behind these projects, sometimes it can be hard to figure out who's behind it. So we were looking at different indicators, like not just their teams, but also their communities. What percentage of their Twitter followers are identified as women, what percentage of their GitHub contributors, and then looking, of course, at their team and leadership, the representation there. And so right now, we are pulling that data manually. There's the hope that that can be, automated in the future. But I think what we found so far has proven that it's a really worthwhile exercise to do. And I know, I personally had a lot of aha moments and sometimes surprised, like a team I didn't expect, like had more diversity or even had initiatives in place. And then I think for those that don't, it also is a great conversation starter to invite people rather than to like create shame and say, we don't feel you have enough diversity. It's like inviting them to the table and saying, hey, these are things that are important to us in our community. And there's a whole untapped audience that would love to get into this space and would love to see mindfulness for people on the planet. Here are some indicators we're looking at, benchmarks. We'd love to have you share, because there also may be things we're not aware of in these projects, right, that are in the pipeline. And I think if we create mindfulness around this, it'll encourage an incentive as well for people to report on this. And again, it is early days, and already we're seeing responses in the crypto community when people have brought out attention, like Elon's infamous, tweet around Tesla and everything, that catalyzed a whole response and a group that came together to create standards for mining, for example, and companies like Marathon Digital Holdings committing to be completely carbon neutral by the end of this year in response to that. So I think that's the point too, is it's early days. This information we collect, while it might feel a little scrappy right now, it's only going to continue to get better as we fine tune it and welcome others into the conversation. And we can't underestimate the power of collecting that information, publicizing it, and inviting people to respond to it.
Thanks, Joy. Yeah, for the realism, like that grounded realism, but the realization that it only takes that spark, right? And taking this first step is just one of the many steps we can take on this journey together. And this is just an incredible moment to just welcome and invite collaborators and contributors. We're part of that first step, but we're going to need a real army of amazing people who want to be part of it as well. So if you're part of a protocol or you feel like you can contribute, we have a contributor form that we can share in the chat as well. If you wanted to check out more about what we're up to, or even if you have ideas, that's 90% of this too is coming up with creative solutions to what seem like more manual or potentially opaque options right now. So I'm super inspired by this group in particular. I think it's just the beginning of something really exciting, and I appreciate all of you joining today to share the story and being part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.